Well, this movie made me hate men. Battle of the Sexes is directed by Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris, which you may have heard their names before. They haven't made a whole lot of other movies, but they have made these two movies, Ruby Sparks and Little Miss Sunshine. Clearly, I'm a fan, and I was really gearing to see this movie, and I didn't care what it was about. I trust those two as directors and writers and everything else between. Battle of the Sexes is the true story of two tennis players, Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs, and it's a historical example of prejudice when it came down to sexism and how we treat women as a gender, as a society, as a person, as a working class, as anything, as lower than men. Obviously, we've been talking about this for generations, and this was a not so often told chapter in gender equality rights. It stars Emma Stone and Steve Carell and a number of other actors you're probably going to recognize while watching. I would just forewarn you that while a lot of the actors in this movie are comedians, this isn't a comedic movie. It's way more dramatic than anything else. I know one of the genres is comedy, and we will get to that later. First off, it's the people score. With the acting, I think pretty much everybody did a great job in the role. Steve Carell was more or less just a goofy dude, as he often is in his movies. Not to say it was bad acting, since the guy he's portraying was a goofy dude in general, and he looks a lot like him, and so did Emma Stone, at least the way that they were made up to look. Acting definitely gets 2 out of 2 possible stars. Characters, on the other hand, I don't think I'm really going to remember this movie for the characters. Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs, that's fine. In general, this is a gender equality film, and a lot of the females pretty much feel identical, and all the men feel identical as two separate things that are clashing head to head. So they all kind of blend together, so you're not going to really remember the characters specifically other than Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs. 1 out of 2 possible stars. The casting, I was a big fan of the casting. Like I said, these people really do look like their real-life counterparts, as you'll see in the all too familiar real-life pictures in the end. 2 out of 2 possible stars. The importance. Does everybody add to the plot equally the same? Once again, no, they all blend together as two big heads clashing together. There are some characters here and there that influence the direction the people go, but for the most part, you don't really care about anybody but those two leads. 1 out of 2 possible stars. Chemistry. Really good chemistry between the idea of men versus women and how insane it is from today's standards looking back. Emma Stone's got great chemistry with all her girls. She has great chemistry with Steve Carell. Steve Carell has great chemistry with her and his guys. All in general, I think the chemistry was pretty good. 2 out of 2 possible stars. Writing score. The dialogue, I'm going to give full points here because it's absolutely insane what men were able to get away with saying. People didn't care what guys said when they said that they are not only self-entitled chauvinistic pigs, but they're still better than women, and that women should take their place in the kitchen making sandwiches. And it angered me watching this, and I think that was a big part of what they wanted to do. So dialogue gets 2 out of 2 possible stars. How balanced was it? Well, it is a true story, so with reality, there isn't a huge direction in what's going on. Because in the very beginning, you have Billie Jean King trying to make a name for women in the sport, just get respect in general. And then somewhere around the halfway point, you have Steve Carell saying, hey, we should do this match together so I can prove to everybody that men are better than women. And she doesn't even accept it at first. So it's like, you think when you're watching that the movie's going to be about this epic match, and it is towards the end, but throughout the movie, it's not. It's just in general about gender equality. For that, I'm going to have to say the balance is 1 out of 2 possible stars. The story itself, very strong, important for anybody to see, even today's standards with what's going on in the politics. 2 out of 2 possible stars. Originality, I can't say I've really seen anything like this. Of course, we've seen gender equality films a million times before, but this was specifically unique in a way that physically took the battle of men versus women in a very literal way. So I'm going to say 2 out of 2 possible stars for originality. Is it interesting? Yes, obviously. I'm a big fan of the directors. I wanted to see it before I even knew what it was going to be about, period. And while I was watching, I was impressed by how well they got their story across. 2 out of 2 possible stars. BTS, behind the scenes. I was generally not really that impressed with what was going on. Visuals was all pretty typical with what you would expect out of a average, forgettable movie. That's 1 out of 2 possible stars. The directing, as much as I love these directors and the movies they make that just feel so phenomenal and unforgettable, I can't say I felt the same with Battle of the Sexes. While it's a story that is unforgettable, I think they excel more with fiction. And so I'm going to have to give the directing 1 out of 2 possible stars. With editing, it's a sports movie, and they could have easily done better with the editing, specifically when it came down to seeing the two players played by Emma Stone and Steve Carell actually playing the sport. All it ever does is show exterior shots of them walking around with frustrated looks on their faces, either happy or sad or whatever, just walking around with a tennis racket. And every time they're actually playing, it's from a faraway shot of a very tiny TV screen of two people playing tennis. And I think that could have been easily done better. For editing, I gotta give it 1 out of 2 possible stars. Advertisement, I do think there was a little bit of false advertising here, because when you're seeing Steve Carell and Sarah Silverman and a ton of funny people being in the movie, you do expect a comedy, at least a dramedy. There really is, like 80% of the cast is comedians, I swear. And it's just not that. It's not really a comedy. While there might be things here and there you might chuckle about, it's not a comedy at all. I'm going to have to say 1 out of 2 possible stars, because while the trailers did give off the general idea that it's about this tennis match, it gave off the wrong idea for the theme. 1 out of 2 possible stars for that. Music, nothing really stands out for me when it comes down to the music, which is another bummer. Little Miss Sunshine has an amazing score. Ruby Sparks has great music that just feels magical when you're watching it. And this has some basic 70s music, and that's really about it. 1 out of 2 possible stars. Narrative arc score. The introduction was definitely there. It's a short introduction, but it was enough to get you to understand what's going on. These women are not being paid fairly, and they need to change something about that. And they do it in such a drastic way that gets them kicked out of the big leagues of tennis, which is huge, and that actually happened. 2 out of 2 possible stars for introduction. The inciting incident, on the other hand, isn't as obvious, because you think it's at the beginning when they get kicked out of the tennis big leagues, but that's not entirely true either, because part of the inciting incident also has to do with Steve Carell's character and his involvement with Billie Jean King. So I'll give that 1 out of 2 possible stars. Obstacles, absolutely. It's a sports movie. What do you expect? 2 out of 2 possible stars. Climax is a culmination of everything. It's basically the end of the game, as you will. 2 out of 2 possible stars there. Falling action, does it calm down and return to a new norm? Yes, it does, in a very powerful way. So 2 out of 2 possible stars. Entertainment score. With the rewatchability, unlike Ruby Sparks and Little Miss Sunshine, I don't feel an automatic desire to see the movie again. I would say I might watch it again. I just have no idea when I'll get around to that. So 1 out of 2 possible stars. Do I consider it a fun movie? Did I have fun while watching? I think I had fun while watching certain elements of the film that felt powerful and real and vulnerable in a way. But at the same time, I could say the same against that and say that some of those scenes with Steve Carell feel fake and everything. So with fun, gets 1 out of 2 possible stars. Do I have an impulse to buy this? The answer to that is no, 0. Do I have an impulse to talk about it other than this review? To be completely fair and honest, I have to say no, 0. Does it suck the audience in? For this, I will say yes. I think it does a great job at luring anybody in to teach them a lesson, send a message, entertain them, and have something to think about after the movie's over, especially for even modern times. So That gets 2 out of 2 possible stars. Specialty. As a true story, as I've already said, this does match the actual case of what happened in real life pretty closely. For that, I'll have to give it 10 out of 10 possible stars. When you watch the trailers, you expect a comedy. How is the comedy in this? Non-existent. 0. Is also listed off as a drama on IMDb, and that is definitely the case. 10 out of 10 possible stars. It is dramatic. Steve Carell is one of my favorite actors because I know he has range, specifically because I've seen him in Dan in Real Life and Little Miss Sunshine. We know he's got the ability to show a good range of emotion. How was this movie compared to all of this rest? I can't say he did a terrible job. I think he actually did a good job. It just felt ingenuine in some regards. For this, I'm going to give half points and say 5 out of 10 possible stars. And finally, was it halfway decent? Of course it was. For that, I'll give 10 out of 10 possible stars. If we add all that up together, we get 70 out of 100 possible stars, 70%. A good range lower than I would rate their other movies, but that's okay. It's still a decent movie that deserves to be seen. Guys, tell me what you thought about Battle of the Sexes in the comments below, and follow me on Tract.tv and Twitter at username IAMDWG. That's IMDWG. And for YouTube, subscribe to me, hit that like button, and hit that bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. Until then, guys, peace out.